Welcome everyone. We are live from Apex One in New Jersey. This is week one of the Super GT League. We are currently in the qualifying session, 15-minute qualifying. This is week one at Red Bull Ring National. All drivers will be in the Super GT GT300 cars for this league. So this will be a new league format for this season. This time around, we're going to be doing a 5-week league. Each week, we will be doing 15 minutes of qualifying, followed by two 25-minute races. So exciting new format, some new cars on the grid for this season. Many of these drivers have not driven anything like these Japanese GT300 cars, so should be very interesting to see how things pan out. Red Bull Ring National is, of course, a very short track. Lap times are looking about a 51 second to 53 seconds. So very quick. All drivers will most definitely be getting in over 25 laps within this 25-minute race. So should be interesting to see where things pan out. But we're going to start by introducing some of our drivers. We'll just check audio levels very quick. All right, so let's start by introducing the drivers in this league. We're going to start off with Maximilian MOI. Max is now competing in his second season here at Apex One. He made his debut season in the Classic GT League, where he was driving in, I believe it was the Celine. Could be wrong on that. But Max is now in the Super GT League. He will be driving the Subaru BRZ. He's very competitive in the Classic GT League, so should definitely be expecting him to be near the top. And at the moment, Max is leading the pack with a 52nd .7. So Max is currently flying in the BRZ. But moving on to our other drivers, one of our more experienced members and lead racers here at Apex One, David De Leon. David is a Porsche enthusiast, to put it into perspective. I don't think he's done any league without using the Porsche, where the Porsche is available. So David saw the old Porsche 996 available in this league, and he jumped right onto it. So David will be competing in the Porsche, as well as one of our other more experienced members, Paul Zavago. Paul having a spin there and actually crashing into, I believe that was Keith. But Paul will be the other driver rocking the Porsche 911 for this season. Paul is usually fighting in the middle of the pack, so he has improved a lot over the past few seasons. So it should be very interesting to see where Paul will stand. But he has done a few leagues now, so definitely has some more experience under his belt compared to some of the other newer drivers, such as Max and our newest competitor, Eric Waters. Eric is a new guy here at Apex. He found the league recently and was one of our later signups for the league. He's competing in the Autobox Arta Garaya. So definitely one of the more uncommon cars in this league. It very much looks like a prototype car, has about 150 more horsepower than the other cars, but there is BOP for the league, which is automatically applied to all cars and will be the same for all circuits. So his car is definitely within line of the others. And at the moment, he's currently sitting in 8th place. Actually, no, sorry, he is now in 9th place with a 53.8. But besides Eric, we also have Brian. Brian is now competing in, I think this must be his 4th or 5th league. Brian is in the Subaru Legacy. He'll be in the all-wheel drive version. So there's a few different versions the drivers had to choose from. We had an all-wheel drive, there was a rear wheel, and then there was two Imprezas. So Brian will be in the Legacy, the all-wheel drive from 2009. And accompanying him in the Subaru Legacy will be Seamus. Seamus is the owner of Apex. He has competed very closely with Brian in all the seasons that they've been in. So Seamus went and decided to go with the same car as Brian. So they'll be competing neck and neck. Same car, same expectations for both drivers. They're usually right near the middle of the pack. So I know they'll be fighting in the middle. Some of our other drivers, including Eric. Eric, I believe, is the second to last driver I have to introduce. But Eric will be competing in the Nissan 350Z. You see him rocking black and white livery. Eric is currently sitting in 5th with a 51.3. We have 6.5 minutes done in the qualifying, 8.5 minutes remaining. And at the moment, Eric's in 5th. He would need to improve on his lap time by 0.3 in order to pass David for P4 to start race 1. But besides Eric and the others that I've already introduced, our other competitor who is competing in the Lamborghini Murcielago, we have Keith Dempsey. Keith is now, I believe, in his 2nd or 3rd league possibly here. But Keith is usually fighting near the top. Last league he performed very well, had many podiums, so should be expecting nothing less for this season. At the moment he's in 3rd with a 50.9, and that is just 300ths off of Elian's time, a 50.8, which puts Elian in P2. Elian is driving the Toyota MRS, where you saw him just crashing into the wall, but Elian is currently in P2 with a 50.8. Elian is also one of our guys that's always fighting at the top. He's won a few leagues by now, so I think his expectations will most certainly be on that P1, not only for this week, but for the entire league. But that is all of our competitors besides one. So we do have 9 drivers participating in this league, and for this race, we have 9 out of the 10 competing. Our 10th driver is Cole. Cole is missing this week. I don't know what car Cole will be driving in, but hopefully he'll be back for week 2. But yeah, just going back on the format, we're 6.5 minutes left to go in the qualifying session. And then once this ends, we'll be beginning race 1 of 2 on the day. Both races will be 25 minutes long. Both will be weighted the same amount of points, although race 2 will be starting with a reverse grid. So if you finish last in race 1, you're going to be starting race 2 in first place, and vice versa. If you finish first, you're going to be starting in last. So should create a very interesting dynamic for the first few laps. Our Formula 4 league, which runs on Wednesday nights, had a lot of chaos at the start of both races, especially in that second race with the reverse grid. Saw a lot of overtakes, a few spins, but very different cars with the Formula 4 cars compared to these high downforce Super GT cars. And they were also at New Jersey Motorsports Park Lightning, which is a very tight and way more technical track in comparison to Red Bull Ring National, which of course is a much more standard circuit. There you see from our shot through the fence, you have much more space on the road for overtakes, and it's a much more of a flowy track. You have longer straightaways, not many turns, so we should definitely be seeing a lot of drafting. I think being within a half second or less within the driver in front of you will give you some huge benefits being in the draft. But other than that, pit stops are not mandatory, so all drivers should hopefully be out on track for the entirety of the race. Although we have seen in our past leagues, some drivers have underfueled and other drivers have gotten into very bad crashes, which have sent them into the pits for an extended amount of time. So the damage is set to 100% for this league, meaning any crashes could give you not only body damage, but damage to your engine as well as your gearbox. So there's definitely a lot on the line here for these drivers. Want to make sure that they keep it clean. They definitely want to be cautious in the first lap and even the second lap with those cold tires. But setups will definitely play a big factor as well. I know some of the drivers have been messing with their setups, not only to make the car feel more consistent, but to also dial in those tire temperatures and tire pressures. So those drivers will definitely be having an edge over the others. But as of right now, Max remains in first. He's the only driver who has posted under a 50-second lap time. Max is in first place by 9/10 of a second, so pretty decent gap between him and the rest of the pack. And at the moment, seems to be confident with that lap time, possibly making some adjustments to the car setup. But we're gonna take a look on board with David. David is in second at the moment. He just overtook Elian for P2 by just 0.03 of a second. So P2, 3, and 4 are all separated by less than 1/10 of a second. So should make for some very close racing. I know all three of these guys have historically been very close to each other in terms of overall pace. So I'm very excited to see how they compete in their first week in these Super GT cars, which of course are very different than the typical modern GT3s that a lot of them may be used to. So these cars most of them are in the early 2010 era. We have some of them actually dating beforehand. The Legacy is from 2009, and I believe the MR2 or the MRS will be the oldest one. That one is from 06 to 08. But yeah, we have some from the early 2010s. BRZ I think is the most modern car, being from 2012. But besides that, a lot of them are from the early and mid 2000s. So these cars are very high downforce cars. Well suited for this track. There's not many low speed turns, which is definitely where these cars struggle. But I'm going to show you guys some footage of Eric, as he currently is in P5 and needs to improve by 2/10 in order to jump over Keith for P4. 2 minutes left in the qualifying. Sun is now dropping, so the track is getting a bit colder. Don't know if that's going to make it better or worse for these drivers, but we'll see what Eric can do in these last 2 laps. So we're now approaching the end of the qualifying session. Max has held on to his pole position. David was able to improve on his lap time, but unfortunately not enough to put him in P1. Sits half a second off from Max. But he did jump ahead of Elian by 0.4 of a second. Elian and Keith remain super close. The two of them just separated by 0.03. Elian is in third in the MRS, and then Keith will be starting race 1 and 4th in the Murcielago. All right, so we are back. We are 2 minutes away from the start of race 1. Showing you guys here on the right side, you'll see the results of the qualifying session. Pull these up. So yeah, so it looks like we have Max starting in first, followed by David, and then Elion. Behind him will be Keith, and then followed by him will be Eric. Seamus and Brian, I believe, were separated by a tenth or two in the qualifying. I'm trying to find the timing board. Yeah, so I believe they were separated by actually 600ths, two of them. So it should be very close. But besides those two, you have Paul starting the race in 8th, followed by Eric starting in 9th. So good luck to all drivers. The sun has now set here in Austria, and we'll be starting race 1 in 45 seconds. And it is lights out and away we go. Max leading the pack at the moment, though 3 drivers going wide. Keith is going to jump out in front, although he's going to overshoot the turn and go off track. At the moment, Keith and David are neck and neck, although David has the inside line. David's going to get the jump. Keith falls back, as well as Eric. Seamus has now jumped up into 3rd place. Heard some door banging from the 2 guys at the back of the pack. I believe Brian may have been one of the drivers involved, but at the moment, all drivers still on track. No major spins or collisions yet. David is leading the race. Keith is close behind. The 2 of them are breaking away from the rest of the pack. At the moment, P3 through 6 are all within half a second of each other. Here you see Eric attempting to make a move. No, Eric will get overtaken by Max. Also see Seamus jumping out ahead, now with a comfortable gap in 3rd, about a second away from the 4th and 5th place drivers. Elion and Brian are now fighting for P4. Looking on board now with Paul. Paul is in a battle with Eric. Paul has just made the move on the inside of Eric for P6. Paul had a great run down the start-finish straightaway. allowed him to make a super clean and easy overtake over Eric, who's in the 350Z. Sorry, so we're back. Just had to help one of our guys. But looking on board with the battle for P1, David just had an off track a little bit, which slowed him down and gave Keith a massive run down the straightaway. Keith is now leading the race. Just a small mistake there from David shows the margins here at Red Bull Ring. So the tiniest mistake will slow you down a ton leading into these longer straightaways. The driver closely behind gets in the draft, and next thing you know, he's running past you. And that is exactly what Keith was able to do to make the move for P1. Both drivers have about a 1 second gap between the rest of the pack. Seamus is currently in P3, 1 second away from David. But this is now the battle for P6. This is between Max in the Subaru BRZ and Eric, who's behind him in the Nissan 350Z. Two drivers battling it out for P6. Still 20 minutes left to go, so plenty of time. But Eric runs wide, getting a little overambitious through the last turn. That's going to cost him a few tenths going down into the start-finish straightaway. But David seems to have either slowed down or possibly Seamus to be catching up to both David and Keith. Seamus is now just a half a second off both Keith and only 0.2 off of David. Three drivers are now going to be battling it out, see who will finish on the podium and where. But of course, still plenty of time left to go. But we're going to take a look back in the battle for P4. This is between Brian and Elian. Elian is in the Toyota MRS, Brian in the Legacy. There you saw Elian, I think, tapping the rear bumper of Brian a bit. Not enough to put him off, though, but it is going to be enough to slow him down by at least half a second there. Although Brian spins, Brian is now way off track. That'll cost him P4 and not the next position, because that was Eric going past him, who is a few laps down. But Brian is now going to be facing pressure from both Max and Eric. Max is just half a second behind Brian, and Eric is right on the rear bumper of Max. I think the two of them are going to be in each other's drafts now. Elian looks to have a decent gap both in front and behind. He has a 5 second gap to Seamus in front of him and an 8 second gap to Brian, who's behind him. There you see Brian making his way around the blue flag driver, as well as Max. Max will be hoping to make that overtake soon, so he's not slowed down too much. But we're going to go back and forth between battles here. David is close behind Keith in the battle for P1, all while Eric and Max continue to battle it out. Eric is sitting on the rear bumper of Max, almost brushes him, but is able to avoid the contact. I'm going to cut to David, and David has gone off track, which is going to cost him a ton of time. He's now way behind Keith, and Sheamus has now made the clean overtake for P2. We just missed it, but that mistake there from David has lost him some time over Keith, as well as that second place position. Still has a decent gap between him and Elion, who's in P4. Paul has just put up his fastest lap of his race so far with a 53.2. Also see one of our other drivers off track at the moment. But we're back on board with David in the Porsche 911. David is currently in third, just 3/10 behind Sheamus. David's fastest lap so far is a 50.5. Sheamus's fastest lap is a 51 flat. So David is looking about a half second faster in terms of pace. Although Sheamus has proved to be the more consistent driver so far. We saw the spin previously from David, which lost him a few seconds in time. Don't know if Sheamus has had any major mistakes, but at the moment is keeping it on track. Just put up a 51.3, which is directly comparable to Keith's 51.3. All while David put up a 51.2, but the two of them are going back and forth now. Sheamus is out ahead, David slightly behind. Minutes left to go in this race. Also do want to point out there is an extra 2 points being awarded to the driver with the fastest lap. At the moment, that award, sorry about that. So at the moment, that award would be going to David, who has put up a 50.566. The driver in second at the moment is Keith with a 50.8. So Keith would need to improve on his lap time by 3/10 in order to gain the extra 2 points. Although Keith is currently in first with a 1.1 second gap. So the most important thing right now for Keith is keeping it on track, keeping the lap times consistent, and avoiding any chaos. But at the moment, Keith spins! Keith spins! Just as I say, Keith needs to avoid chaos. Keith faces one of the blue flag drivers in Paul, and he spins, although Sheamus has spun as well. Sheamus has just spun alongside, I believe that was Eric. Paul is still spun. Eric has now gone off track trying to avoid the drivers that were all over the place. Eric and Paul are struggling to get back on track, although they've now finally done so. But that is most certainly going to send the entire grid all over the place. Now the closest gap is between Keith and Sheamus. Keith was looking very strong for about 10 minutes until he faced, I believe that was his second blue flag driver of the race. Unfortunately, he was not able to make the overtake. had a huge spin leading up into turn 1, and then now puts him in 4th place. Keith is now a second off from Seamus, so still plenty of time for him to make up. You have 11 and a half minutes left in the race, but at the moment, David is leading the pack by just under 3 seconds. Elion is in second in the Toyota MRS, and then Seamus is sitting in third in the Subaru Legacy. Paul's mistake has dropped him down to 8th place. Although Paul is now off track again. Another costly mistake from Paul, which is going to lose him at least 5 seconds. I also see Eric currently sitting off track. Two drivers had a tough start to their season. Although for race 2, they will be starting the race in P1 and 2 if these results hold, which means they will have the chance to redeem themselves here at Red Bull Ring National Layout. Of course, shorter track layout, all lap times are within 50 seconds. I am back. Sorry for the lack of commentary. I was just talking to one of our customers. But at the moment, Elion has a commanding lead in the Toyota MRS. Elion is ahead by just under 9 seconds. Elion has proved the most consistent so far, avoided all the chaos, and that has most certainly paid off. Keith was in front for a while, but unfortunately had an incident with Paul. That now puts him in P2, although Keith is going to be battling it out for the last 2.5 minutes in this race 1. Seamus is right behind Keith. Seamus attempted to make an overtake, but braked too late, locked up a little, and that makes room for Max to go by in the Subaru BRZ. Max has now made the move for P3. Seamus is now out of podium with that. Seamus just had a slight spin, was able to recover, although he went in the grass. That's going to lose him some more time. Seamus is now sitting a half second behind Max. Keith is holding his position. The battle between Max and Seamus gave Keith a little bit more of a cushion. Keith is now ahead by about half a second. We're going to be looking at the timing boards here as the two drivers cross the line. Keith's last lap was a 51.35 to be exact. Max's last lap was a 51.36. So the two drivers just separated by 1/100th of a second in their last laps. At the moment, the 2 extra points for fastest lap will be going to Max, who has a 50.496. In second place is David with a 50.566. So David will need to improve on his lap by about 7/100ths in order to gain those 2 extra points. Elion, who's in first, his fastest lap of the race is a 50.9. Elion would need to improve by half a second in order to claim those 2 extra points. At the moment, he's running a bit slower, so I don't think he'll be able to do so on this lap. Other than that, though, the gaps seem to be pretty big. David is in 5th. 5 seconds separates him and Seamus in 4th. And then Brian is 13 seconds behind in 6th. Eric is now sitting a lap behind both of them. And then Paul is 4 laps behind the leader. But we're taking a look now at the battle for P2. This is between Max and Keith. Max is going to attempt to move on the outside, but he goes inside and overtakes Keith. A beautiful move there from Max. Saw him fake out Keith. Looked to be going on one side and then made the move on the other. Although Keith has the faster run on the inside. And Keith is now going to hug the inside of the turn on turn 1. Keith makes the overtake. Although I think Max has the better run. 2 of them going side by side. Max locks up. He overtakes Keith. Keith almost spins. Very aggressive move there from Max, asserting his dominance. But that was it. That was the last lap. Wow. Max crossed the line just out ahead. Max beats out Keith by less than 1/10 of a second. Amazing racing from both drivers, going door to door to cross the line. I think that was the closest finish we've seen from a while. Didn't even realize that was the last lap. Max was able to take the edge, but Elion will claim first in the first race of the season, and David will claim the 2 extra points. Or no, sorry. Max actually will claim the 2 extra points for fastest lap with a 50.496. Some amazing racing there in lap 1, or in race 1, excuse me. But our podium finishers are Elion, Max, and Keith. I will be back in about 2 to 3 minutes for the start of race 2. All right, and we are at the start of race 2. Drivers going 4 wide headed into T1. Eric goes wide. We see a spin back, plenty of chaos. Sheamus is now spun. Sheamus is at the back of the pack with that spin. Keith is leading the pack at the moment. A spin there from Eric though. Eric goes into the wall in the last turn of the track. Big mistake there from Eric. That's going to slow him down a ton. At the moment, he's in P7. Although Sheamus is now going to be making his way by down the start-finish straightaway. Paul is in the pit lane. Paul is going to be taking a pit stop, I believe, for repairs. That'll put Paul in 9th. Elion is now on the tail of David. Just 2/10 separates the two drivers. This is the battle for P2. Elion in the Toyota, David in the Porsche 911. Elion has a better run, but Elion smashes into David. That'll most certainly be a penalty for Elion. That is going to cost David a ton of time. David has now dropped back into 6th place, goes completely sideways, and gets passed by Brian, Elion, and Max. Elion is now right on the tail end of Eric in the battle for P2, despite the previous scuffle with David. Elion's gonna be hoping to make this overtake within the next few laps, although we just see in the back Max has made the overtake over Brian, although Brian now has the better run going down the start-finish straightaway. The two of them are going to be going side by side heading into turn 1. Although Brian is slightly out ahead, Brian's going to have the better run and is going to remain ahead. And that's the overtake complete for Max. Brian goes wide and Max breezes by. Makes the move on the inside. P4 now secured for Max. With 21 minutes left in the race. We're about 4 minutes down. Still plenty of time left to go. But Elion is still hunting down Eric. Although Max is now caught up to Elion. And Max is now right on the rear bumper of Elion. Max goes wheel to wheel for a second, although Elion jumps back out ahead. Max looks to make a move on the outside. Don't know if he'll be able to do so, although he does have a decent run. Eric has slowed down a lot though, and Max has gone around both drivers. I don't know what happened with Eric. David and Brian are going side by side. David's going to have the move on the inside, though. Although Brian smashes into David for a second. Not enough to put him off, though. That is the move complete for David. P3 secured. Brian is now about a half second behind. 16.5 minutes left to go in the race. Keith remains out in first with about a 1.5 second gap to Max, who's behind. There we see Eric passing Paul, who's the blue flag driver. And just as I say that, Paul's going to have a massive spin. Paul is in 8th. That's only going to put him further back behind the rest of the pack. There you see Seamus making his way around. Max is slowly catching up to Keith. Taking a look at their last lap times, Keith's last lap was a 51 flat. Max put up his fastest lap of the race with a 50.1. The two of them have just crossed the line, and again, Max has beat out Keith. Max's last lap was 0.6 quicker than Keith's last lap, and now 0.6 separates the two drivers. If Max can keep this up, I think he'll be looking at a potential overtake within the next few laps. Max is already getting closer as each turn approaches. The sun has now set here in Austria. The headlights are on from all drivers. 15 minutes left in this race. Both drivers now approaching the start-finish straight, but Keith has a wiggle, and Keith is going to lose some speed going down into the straightaway, which is going to make way for Max to have a clean overtake. Max now sits in first, ahead of Keith. So Max has overtaken Keith a little while ago and since has run away with the lead. Max is now just under 3 seconds ahead of Keith. Big gap there, only seems to be increasing. I believe he also holds the fastest lap of the race, which would earn him an extra 2 points, in addition to the 25 points that he'd get if he's able to hold on to P1. Gonna go on board with Elion for a bit though. Elion is currently in P5. He is about a second behind Brian, although Elion's last lap was a half second quicker than Brian's last lap. So we should be seeing Elion catching up to Brian within the next couple of turns and next few laps, and hopefully looking to make an overtake soon. Besides those two, Eric is about 2 seconds behind Elion, currently sitting in 6th place. And then behind Eric, we have Seamus in 7th, followed by Paul in 8th. Elion is now getting closer and closer though. Saw a small off track there from Brian, although he was able to keep it on the curb. But Elion is only getting closer. He's going to look to have a better run down the straightaway. This is definitely one of the parts where we've seen the most overtakes through race 1 and 2. Elion is going to tuck on the inside. Front wheels are now even with Brian's rear wheels. He's going to look to go up on the inside, but Brian is going to have a better run and is going to hold his position on the outside. Clean driving from both drivers and some great defending there from Brian, just keeping his pace. I think Elion was definitely playing it a little safe there. Recognizes there's just over 9 minutes left in the race. Still plenty left to fight for and plenty of laps left to plan his overtake over Brian. But if Elion is able to make the overtake, he would still be 10 seconds off of David in front of him. So I think this could be where Elion has his eyes set for the race on P4. And just as I say that, Brian goes wide, goes over the curbing, all 4 wheels off the track. That's going to slow him down and give Elion the better run. Elion's now going to have the run going down the inside and is able to complete the move for P4. Although Brian is still fighting, Brian tucks on the outside for a second, but is going to tuck back behind. The fighting between those two drivers has now made way for Eric to get closer. Eric is now just a few tenths behind Brian. The 3 drivers are now going to be battling it out for P4, 5, and 6. And as they continue to battle it out, I think Seamus is going to get closer. Seamus is 2 seconds behind Eric, although Seamus is quickly catching up. Eric now has a good run going down the start-finish. Eric is going to tuck down the inside the same way Elion attempted, although he's not going to have a good enough run and is going to make his way back behind Brian, settle in for P6 and plan his next overtake. Two drivers are now nearly touching front splitter and rear diffuser. Eric almost slides out of control, trying to keep it close behind Brian. He is able to keep it under control though, but that is going to lose him a few tenths going down the straightaway. Brian is still close to Elion. A move for P4 is now not out of the books for Brian. Although Eric is still close, so Brian is still going to be in defending mode. Seamus is still... Actually, Seamus has now reduced the gap. He's now just 1.5 seconds off of Eric, whereas just a lap ago, he was 2 seconds off of Eric. So Seamus is now cutting down the gap. 6 minutes left in the race. Max still holds the fastest lap of the race with a 50.1. The driver in second is David with a 50.6. David would need to improve by half a second in order to claim those 2 extra points. But at the moment, 3.5 seconds separates Max and Keith for P1. Keith is in P2, and 2 seconds behind him is David in third. But Brian, Elion, and Eric continue to remain close, although David is in third. There's just a glitch in the timing board. Keith and David have not overtaken each other. Keith remains out in second. David remains in third. But I did just see a driver get past. I don't know who that was. Oh, that's Paul there. Paul's the blue flag driver. Eric is going to bump into Paul trying to make the overtake. He is able to make the overtake though. And now Seamus is attempting to overtake Paul. So Paul is 2 laps down. Seamus is able to get past him and is now right next to Eric in the battle for P6. Seamus makes the move on the outside and is able to complete the move. A very uncommon overtake there, making the move on the outside, but Seamus is able to stick it and overtakes Eric for P6. The fight between the 2 drivers has now allowed Brian to get way ahead though, 4 seconds to be exact. But Seamus is now going to be defending this position, and Elion is also going to be defending his 4th place position from Brian. Brian is just under a half second behind Elion. 3.5 minutes left to go in the race. These are the 2 battles. Other than that, pretty decent gaps between the rest of the drivers. Paul remains in P8, Max remains in P1, and then we have Keith and David, who are the current podium sitters if these results hold. Brian is getting closer to Elion, and Eric is getting closer to Seamus. The race is heating up. David is also getting closer to Keith. David's last lap was 2 tenths quicker than Keith's. The 2 drivers have just crossed the line again, and David's last lap was 4 tenths quicker than Keith's. So David is catching up as the laps go on, although the time is running out. Just over 2 minutes left to go here at Red Bull Ring. Eric is about 7 tenths off of Seamus, and Brian is also about 7 tenths off of Elion. And this is the battle for P4 as well as the battle for P6. Brian, of course, in the Subaru, as well as Seamus. Seamus had the edge over Brian in race 1, but so far in race 2, Brian has come out ahead and remains ahead by about 3 seconds with 1.5 minutes left to go in race 2. Max would be looking at 25 points plus the extra 2 points for fastest lap, 27 points for this race. Keith would be looking at 18 points. We just saw in the background, Eric got a little loose going into the last turn. That's going to cost him a few tenths down into the straightaway and will possibly end his hopes of making an overtake over Seamus. And he has another wiggle there in the rear end. I think those rear tires are now overheated. He almost loses control completely, but is able to again remain on track, remain on all 4 tires. But once again, Eric will lose a few tenths there from that mistake. And I think that'll be P7 secured for Eric. I don't think he'll be able to make up the time now after those mistakes. Brian is not going to be able to catch up to Elion. And at the moment, the gap between Keith and David is 1.3 seconds, so I don't think David is going to have enough time to catch up. Although the last 2 or 3 laps, he's most certainly been quicker by a couple tenths, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I think the drivers are now going to be seeing the white flag as they cross the line with 10 seconds left to go in race 2. Seen plenty of overtakes, saw some lap 1, turn 1 chaos, and a lot of excitement here in Austria. But there you see from the message at the top, Max, who is the current leader, is now on his final lap, and Max will be looking to get his first win of the season in the Subaru BRZ. Very strong performance here from Max. All he needs to do now is keep it on track, and that'll be P1 secured for him. And that's the end of the race for the top 3 finishers. Max has crossed the line for P1, Keith has crossed the line for P2, and David will cross the line for P3. Elion finishes in P4, followed by Brian, Seamus, and then Eric will now be crossing the line for P7 in the 350Z. A strong second race there from Max, and a good performance as well from Keith and David, earning themselves a spot on the podium for the second race. But that is all here for week 1, as you see Eric doing some donuts to send it off. But some great racing here at Red Bull Ring. Very exciting racing in both races. I think race 2 had a little bit more of a chaotic start to the race, but race 1 we saw a very, very close finish between 2 of the drivers, finished just 500ths within each other, and race 2 produced some great fireworks as well. But that'll be all from me here at the booth for this week. We will be back same day, same time next week for week 2 of the Super GT League. This one was, of course, at Red Bull Ring. Week 2, we will be taking the trip over to Zolder, where another short track, although it will be definitely longer than Red Bull Ring and definitely more technical. So should be interesting to see where things line up after week 1 leading up into week 2. But thank you all for tuning in. Again, we'll be live same day, same time next week. We will also be live next Wednesday at 8 o'clock for week 2 of the Formula 4 League racing at Lime Rock Park. But if you guys don't follow us on Instagram, give us a follow, apex1.nj. That's where we'll be posting all league updates, including the race results, as well as the standings week to week. But other than that, that is all for tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys also aren't subscribed to our channel, hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get notified anytime we go live. But that is all for tonight. Thank you guys all again for tuning in.